Ladies and gentlemen, this is a kind request. Please be seated and kindly turn off your cell phones. The session begins in 5 minutes.
Hello, 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 hello.
You're not going to announce it?
Hello? Sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, this session is the book launch of Coming of Age by Salman Tariq Kureshi. We have our moderator and our guests here. You can start, Mr. Hoori. Sorry, Ms. Hoori.
Q. Is this working? Can you hear me? Okay. I am going to start by reading out one of the poems from this book, which really resonates with me, and it's called Dancer. Okay, just a second. I'll bring it closer. Can you hear me now? Okay. So this poem is called Dancer. With a rustle of clothing and a tentative initial tinkling of ankle bells, the dancer steps out onto the rooftop. There is a sweeping flourish of backward curling fingers. Her foot arches forward, toes pressed down on cold concrete. A heel descends. Tha, ikatha. She pirouettes, her hands as swans floating above her head, then curtsies with a supple bend of her knee, her palm rising towards her inclined forehead in salutation. She dances alone, her audience the blank windows of buildings around and a moon just past the full. Na thin thin na thin thin na. Her feet follow the rhythms she generates with herself. Converting a turn into a series of small leaps, she is off across the rooftop, between silent TV antennae and heaps of broken bric-a-brac and around the base of the looming water tower. She dances the many stories of her life, her art becoming a forsaken forest maiden by a lotus pond, a playful kitten prancing in a shaft of moonlight. She is a gazelle that springs over meadow grasses, a princess adorning herself with necklaces, rings. Sculptress of space, she grasps skeins of nighttime darkness and molds them, her limbs and gesturing hands shaping fitful, changing forms. She pirouettes again, spins, keeps spinning. Her foot slaps are a sharp staccato on the rooftop. The pealing of her ankle bell crescendos to a jangling thunder. Na din dinna, na din dinna. Her hands rotate the sky above her, the moon and the dim eclipsed stars. She is a pivot spinning a planet beneath her feet. Ta thin tika tika tha tha, spinning. So, well, we usually begin sessions by introducing the guests. I'm going to just do a very, very short introduction. Salman, of course, being the poet. He's an English language poet, writer, and columnist. His poems have appeared in many anthologies, and I'm not going to name all of them. They're all here for you to read. It would take up too much time, and we have very short time. Zarmeena Raza is a poet and essayist whose work explores relationships and possibilities. She is the head of the literature department at Cedar College and teaches at Karachi Grammar School. Amberina Mahmood Kazi taught English literature and language at the English department, Karachi University, for 30 years before retiring. And of course, we have with us Sheema Kermani, needing no introduction, dancer, activist, my guru. So, coming of age, as the title suggests, is a collection of Salman's poems from when he was 16 and wrote his first poem, Hummingbird, till the last poem in this book, written as recently as in the summer of 2024, titled Night Song. Our speakers will be talking about these poems and other poems included in the poem. But first, Salman, perhaps you would like to say a few words about the 90 poems in this collection.
Thank you, Hoori. It's not much that I want to say. I would hope that if you buy the book, the poems will speak for themselves. I started writing at a very young age. There's a lot of poems in my mother's personal library, English language poems. My father's poems tended to be more that he kept in Farsi, which I didn't understand. English I understood, and my mother had mostly. So I started reading, and for some reason, when other children were perhaps doing rough house outside, I was reading poetry. And I developed definite ideas about it at a very young age, and by about 13 or 14, perhaps, I was attempting to write something like verse, and of course it was nonsense, most of it. The point is that, okay, this book carries my work over more than 60 years, including the very first poem that Hoori mentioned. Hummingbird was not the first I ever wrote. I wrote a lot of stuff before that, most of it totally discardable exercises and so on, and meters, and bakara. Hummingbird was my first attempt at a serious poem. which I gave for publication to the Ravi. I had just joined government college, my first year in college, and I gave it to the Ravi for publication. The editor did not consider it worth publishing, fortunate, but I reproduce it here in case anybody considers it worth reading today. I've been writing ever since then. I've been asked, why do I write in English? No particular reason. It's the language I know best, as simple as that. My mother was English speaking and I wrote in English. I have tried Urdu, I have written in Urdu, and I've even translated from Urdu and Saraiki. But no, my work in Urdu was substandard, and I left it at that, and I stuck to English after that. I think in English, I dream in English, and that's the fact of the matter, and I make no apologies for it at this stage in life. I've also been asked, what kind of poems do you write? Which I guess means, who are the influences? My influences, for those who know English poetry of the 20th century, and which are from the 20th century, my influences, primarily from the 1920s, T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, and the Imagists. To me, Imagism, the capture of the look and feel and smell of a location or a place or a person, is the core of poetry. And any meaning you derive therefrom is going to vary. But that meaning is for others to find. I record what I see and something of what I hear. I have been, one of my influences certainly in later life was Ted Hughes, the husband of the widower of Sylvia Plath. In his introduction to these poems, Adrian Hussain has written a lovely introduction. Adrian refers to or suggests an influence from Sylvia Plath. He's not entirely wrong. Sylvia was a brilliant poet, she's one of the greatest, but she has a very narrow range of subjects, and I think mine is much larger. His reference, of course, is to the confessional nature of Sylvia Plath and, of course, of the American poets of that time, Robert Lowell and Sexton and so on. Look, Robert Lowell was such a great writer that he was bound to be an influence on anybody else trying to write at the time. And certainly I can claim. However, my fundamental difference with the so-called confessional poets is that, yes, perhaps I pick up extreme subject matter at times, but I like to stay in control, and I like to be out of my poems and create an object for others to enjoy. I don't want to write a diary or a journal. I believe myself to be an artist, and I believe an artist creates something that the viewer or the reader or whatever the audience then will enjoy or decipher or otherwise. Same way here. I am outside my poems most of the time, even if they express inner emotions. And that is not true of the confessionals, who tend to make look at Sylvia Plath. I mean, she's doing a striptease. And she says it in Lady Lazarus, the big striptease. Observe my heart. There is a charge for seeing my heart. No, I'm sorry. There's no charge for reading my poetry. It is not confessional. But yes, it can be dealing with extreme subject matter. And that's why I thought I would read a particular poem, this one, which is, yes, it deals with extreme subject matter. Okay. For the reading, I'll do that. This poem is called Piranha. Now, those who know the piranha know it. Those are carnivorous fish found in South America. Rather fascinated me. So I wrote this poem, Piranha. The epigraph to the poem is, which I quoted from one of these nature magazines, a school of these relatively small fish can strip a goat to its skeleton in 10 minutes. A man takes somewhat longer. Given time, even the bones are gnawed and splintered for what is contained within. The poem goes, at the moment we discover him, his shirt remains unruffled, with one red hole almost unnoticeable in front, beneath which his liver is being nibbled into slowly. His jacket still retains its intended creases and is free from stains. At the end of one arm, where his hand was, there sprouts a wriggling frond of the feeders. The irreversibility of what's taking place bemuses us. The end is known. There's only the process of waiting. His collar is immaculate, and his tie only slightly askew. His eyes are lucid, noting color, form. His mouth is wide in an unending scream. Thank you. Hoori, can you come in?
Thank you, Salman. So Moin Faruqi, in his foreword to the book, which is very aptly titled Qureshi's imagery-driven poems, he says, reading his Salman's work, one is always presented with concrete, almost palpable images with his vast vocabulary, deep knowledge, and empathy for great poets, he infuses his own verse with a rich and imaginative visual quality. In this context, I would like, Zarmeena, for you to read out the poems that you have chosen. Zarmeena is reading out the first poem that Salman ever wrote, Hummingbird, which, as she says, she feels very emotionally about that poem and the imagery in it. And perhaps you could just, talk about this aspect of Salman's poetry, the imagery.
Sure. Hummingbird, like you, unfolded, fall from the sky and clasp to rest at the edge of the air and off again, winged up to the leafy ledge and then down, skimming the surface of denser lower air, to scamper on wings as on toes and skip up to a hovering halt. The translation from motion to vibrating stillness is my desire. Where the breezes intersect the yellow clash of a flowering mustard field, I see your coruscating colors for a moment only. A scintillant flash of sense, instant from one station to the next, all immediately here and again there. Brilliant precipitate of springtime light, I would like to learn in this and 100 other ways how, like you, like this, to dexterously flex a wing and leap astride the upward air and lift down, up. Flickering strokes to rise, over the fields to climb, to fly. And then the unfaltering ascent, confronting the floating wind blasts, leaping over invisible knolls of air to an unseen peak and sliding over and down the long arching steepness of the sky, to sweep unfolding this way, downwards and pause, quivering at the lip of a hyacinth. Just This is just beautiful. I know a lot of people have written about it, but I just love this. The imagery, the playfulness, it's just so delightfully fun. I was wondering, okay, thank you. I was wondering, how did you feel when you first wrote it?
How did I feel? Okay, the particular occasion, the place where I saw the hummingbird is not place in the poem. The actual place was a field which was behind our home in Lahore. There was a field there, but I didn't see the hummingbird there. The hummingbird was actually in our garden, and that's where I saw it. Well, I watched it for several days. It was a lovely, lovely creature, and but the field I'm talking about made me think of fields. So where this is actually located is the banks of the Ravi, and some fields that were there. That's the location in the poem. That's neither here nor there. How did I feel? It took me a while to write it. And all my poems take time. I like to work over them. And it came out not quite right. Then I wrote it again, and it came out better. Then I found it was sounding somewhat Shelley-like. And since I didn't want to be an adolescent romantic, I decided to rewrite it again. And this was a process also. However, one Shelley-like line still remains. I think that's the brilliant precipitate of springtime light. That could be almost pure Shelley. However, back to the poem. How did I feel? Exhilarated. I thought the hummingbird was one of the most beautiful things I'd seen. There it was, jumping about in the air, literally stops, sucks that thing, and I wanted to capture that motion, and then it would fly up and fly down. There was also, I think, in this poem, a slight influence of Manley Hopkins, his Windhower, but that's another story entirely. But this was my own, and how did I feel? I felt elated. And then I rewrote it several times and found myself very, very satisfied with it when I eventually sent it to Ravi. And to my grave disappointment, it was rejected.
That's rather hard to believe. But the craft is so meticulous. As you were saying, you can feel the hummingbird fly up and down, and the rhythm. And I read this out to some of my students, and they were saying that the rhythm is so fluid, it's like liquid. This one and the other one that I really liked, Poem at Year's End. So it's not just the imagery that you capture, but the sound and kinesthetic sense of the hummingbird, which was really amazing and fascinating and lovely to read out. I actually felt when I was reading this, that line from Kubla Khan's Warning, "Weave a circle round him thrice, and close your eyes with holy dread, for he on honeydew hath fed and drunk the milk of paradise." Because I felt that this poet, who could capture something like this, could write about absolutely anything. So I was wondering, with all the selection that you have written, I didn't really publish at this point. I didn't really read anything that was really political. Is there a reason that you didn't include anything political in your collection?
Well, difficult to say. Difficult to say. One can try to analyze one's own poems, but usually somebody else does it better. To be honest, one is always somewhat prejudiced about this phrase or that word. It feels good, feels right, things like that. What can I say? Sense of flight is something I tried to capture in this, which of course is something I never personally experienced, but you dream about it all the time. Everybody does dream about flying. And that was in this, to try to get that in this. As Moin Farooqi says, I think I like to paint a picture. And I think this poem I was successful in doing so. I was really sorry that it was rejected by the editor at that time. The editor and I became friends later on, Thank
you, Zarmeena. You sort of did part of my job by asking the questions. Thank you. Amberina, I know that you have also chosen two poems, Indus and 1971. Why these two, and how do they reflect on the variety of themes in Salman's poetic style?
It's done. Okay, can you hear me? Yes. Thank you. That's a very pertinent question because when I was, can you hear me?
Why don't you just pick up the mic?
Is this better?
Yeah.
Right, this is my classroom teacher's voice. Right. The variety of themes and subject matter in Salman's poetry was, I had thought of him as being a nature poet only, or primarily, but he has such a wide variety of themes and subject matter that I was swept away. Not only was he writing, does he write about nature, the beauty of nature, he also writes about, as you know, the poem that you read out, Piranha, he writes of the horror in nature, the death and destruction of war, the unhappy feeling when someone is close to you is dying, the process of dying, and there is a wide variety. So, I mean, I'm trying to whet your appetites, really, that you do buy the book, because there'll be something for everyone in it. And another thing that really struck me while reading the poems was, as you, Salman, said, was that he doesn't write for himself. It's not like a diary. I felt as though he was talking to me, the individual reader. And while he was doing that, he was forcing me to meditate in some poems, to reflect, to challenge myself, to challenge my current ways of thinking, and probably come out with, talk about it with friends and come out with some other ideas. So this leads me to exactly where I want to be, and that is to read one poem called Indus, which is a poem about the Indus River from its beginnings in the mountains, high up in the crags in Gilgit, and then its journey downwards, down through the plains and into the sea. And it's not just a descriptive poem. There is a lot of description, but it tells you about the purity of the river as it gushes out of the mountain crags, its white color, its blue color splashing into the waterfalls, and then as it comes down into the plains, it becomes sullied, S-U-L-L-I-E-D. And it becomes more like the humans living in there, working there, walking on their fields. And there's a lovely picture of the square fields. You can see it. It's almost like a photograph. And Amberina, I'm sure you must be enjoying your husband's poems because you can see them. As an artist yourself, you can see them. And then, of course, down into the sea. And then if you see that picture, I know there's a very famous picture on Google Maps, which I was trying to locate, of a river coming in a straight line from the mountains down into the sea. That's what I could see while I was reading this, and it's not very long. I'll read it. Such sheer perspectives stun the senses, because he's at a height in Gilgit. Eagle-shunned crags at wing-tip height, flashing their signal mirrors in the mountains. boulders caressed to silt by water. Sharp-edged valleys robed in cloud against the carving sunlight on the peaks. Look down, look down. There, a 25-second drop beneath the hunching bases of mountains nestle into, no, not the plains, the clouds. Blue water dashing white against the rocks, torrents and falls whose earth-bound roar is unheard here beside these plain-high peaks. White river, turning brown at mouths of valleys. Brown river, brown as people. Square fields and endless flatness of the plains. And this is the last stanza. And centuries of cloud have melted. Valleys have sweated froth-white cascades to draw that long brown line down to the sea. And this was written in Gilgit in 1974. I love that poem. When I first read it, I said, oh, another descriptive poem, but oh, it's got life. It makes you think about the centuries of the journey of this river. It gives life to the people, it gives life to the country.
Thank you so much, Amberina.
Yeah.
We have very little time, so I'm sorry, I'm going to ask, we don't have time for the second poem.
Could I just read the second poem without a comment?
We have just 3 minutes
Okay.
left, and we would like Sheema to read the last poem. We started with Hummingbird, and we end with the Night Song.
Easier. This is an amazing poem which Salman has asked me to read, which I'm very honored to read out to you. It's called Night Song, and I think it'll resonate with all of us. Fear the night, my friend. Fear the dark through which you stumble over broken paving stones in your ruined neighborhoods. Fear still more the lightless side lanes and rancid alleyways. The city sleeps while you alone wander in the night. But inexplicable noises seep from behind planked-up windows. Someone sobbing. What could be laughter? Smothered screams, a continual moaning. Fear those noises, my friend. Fear the night. A dog barks near at hand. Another answers. Fear the dog packs. A lone cur will slink away on its mangy belly. But fear the desperate packs of disease-ridden mongrels with dripping fangs. Fear their filthy claws, their infected bite. The moon emerges. The moon emerges. Fear its beams that highlight you. Here, alone, tripping over potholes, your shadow cast heraldic before you. Fear the stalkers, flitting shadows with staring eyes that study your passage from the mouths of alleys, frameless doorways. Fear most, my friend, fear most of all what simmers and ferments within those putrescent alleys or hidden between the unlit backs of buildings where no new dawn will break, nor any redeeming light ever penetrate. Fear the night.
Thank you so much, Sheema. Yes, of course, Salman. Please conclude.
Sorry. One, the very first poem, as I said, proper poem I ever wrote, Hummingbird, commented on that. The one Sheema just read out is the last poem I wrote about a year ago. No, less than a year, about 7-8 months ago. Two, the second point I wanted to make very quickly is that between, I think there have been samples of my different style that we've read out, but what's more important, my political views have been caught between the poem Amberina read in this. I think it expresses some of my intense love for our soil, for our rivers, for our mountains. And the poem Sheema has just read out, which tells about where our society is going. Between these, my political views, I think, are described fully. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We conclude on that note.
Could I just say that Salman's political poems are fantastic.
Sorry?
And he's written a whole series on the 1971 war. I was going to read one out called Conference Time, but please do read it. Huh? Oh, you can't hear. Shall I read it quickly? Conference Time. And this is the time of where the negotiators and the diplomats are sitting, having negotiations because there's a war on. And this was the 1971 war, which saw the dismemberment of Pakistan, but the birth of Bangladesh. Conference Time. We, and you and I, our world becomes a table. And sitting at this table, 3 chairs in the sky. We, and you and I, find ourselves unable to reach across the table or reach across the sky. I can still meet your eye, but all is so unstable. There are roses on the table, and blood rains from the sky. Look downwards. If you try, you will see the gutted houses. No people in those houses. A smell assails the sky. And this is the last stanza. The scent of murder, aye. Life is so unstable. And sitting at this table are we, and you and I. Lovely poem.
Do we have to close now?